to the Nanaimo Design Advisory Panel for March the 11th, always a Thursday. My name is Charles Curl. I'm chair of the panel. We will go through a little bit of introductory business on the agenda, and then because the first project up is one of my firm's projects, I will be stepping away from this screen, but we'll get to that in a second. The number one on the agenda this evening is calling the meeting to order, which I am currently doing. Just a reminder to everyone that the meeting is both recorded and live streamed, so you're on candid camera, literally. Second item on the agenda is adoption of the agenda, so I'm just going to ask if all my panel members are okay with adopting the agenda. Please vote in favor. Thank you. Item 3 is adoption of the minutes from our last meeting. So I know, Marie, you sent an email noting a spelling error on page 4.
Yeah, not Lori will know whether we sorted that out or not. I think I gave the wrong page. You did.
No, I think it's the right page. Anyway, I saw it too. So I don't know. I think with that noted, are there any other notes or comments or questions about the minutes from the last meeting? None.
What was the error? Sorry, what was the error? I missed it. Yeah.
On the first recommendation, where we asked for the design to complement the adjacent neighborhood, it was the word complement as if you were giving someone a compliment, not complimenting someone. So, very minor change. So with that, all in favor of adopting the minutes? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so now this is where it gets interesting. First application, we have 2 applications this evening. The first one up is, again, one from my firm. So I'm going to pass the chair over to Kevin Grasso. He will chair the meeting during the first application, and following guidelines that we received from registered services, I will not only be disappearing from the screen, but I'll also be logging off. I'm not allowed to listen into the meeting, but I'll be watching it on the web. When the first application is done, I will come back and chair the second application. So, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Charles. We'll move on to presentations, and our first presentation is development permit number 1216 at 3180 Island Highway North, and it's going to be introduced by Lisa Berkman.
Hi, everybody. So this is a development permit application for a car wash at 3180 Island Highway. The property is zoned City Commercial Center, CC3, and falls within Development Permit Area 9 for commercial development. The General Development Permit Area guidelines apply to the proposed development, and no variances are proposed. So it's a quick introduction, and that's all for me.
Okay, is the applicant ready with the presentation? If so, can you start sharing your content?
I will. Lisa, do I need access to share my screen?
You should be able to.
Share screen. There it is.
We can see it now, so that's good. It's working.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. We're excited to share this presentation with you all and get your comments and feedback regarding the form and character of our project. As Lisa mentioned, this is a car wash project located at the corner of the Island Highway and at the intersection of Norwell and Bowen. The site is a vacant lot, which was, and you can see by the little image in the right-hand side of the screen here, top right, it was a gas station at one point. It's been vacant for quite some time, and it's adjacent to a Dairy Queen, which has a drive-through. So I just wanted to introduce the context of the site. The property is actually really compelling based on the sort of the use that we're proposing, in that it is pretty much slap bang in the middle of the car dealer epicenter for Nanaimo. What's interesting about that is the fact that this could potentially be an amenity for existing businesses. It can also be an amenity to the visitors of the mall right next to it, and also there is a residential neighborhood that's within a couple of minutes. So we're definitely sort of centered in the right off the highway. It's sort of catered to that kind of service use and amenity within the city. And so what you see on your screen here is just some of the context in and around. In the middle, we have our little car wash project at the corner of right at the intersection. We're flanked by numerous car dealerships, some of quite high quality architecture, which is great. There are some other sites in and around that are probably going to be seeing some future development. Right across the road is one of them. And then we have the mall, which is sort of tucked up in behind us. So we're, as far as the context goes, we're a two-story building, which is sort of similar to the context. The project has some, the site has some environmental challenges, all of which, of course, we have been dealing with and going through. I will flip through to our site plan. So, as I said, Norwell Drive, the Island Highway, and access into the property is in off of Norwell Drive into the shared drive aisle. One of the access points to the neighbouring Dairy Queen beside us. Access into the car wash would be off of this driveway. You would come in here. There's a point of sale where you drive through, select your car wash, and then queue up in a line. And then you come around the corner. The operator of the car wash would come over to your car, service, get it set up and ready, and then you would pull through the car wash this way, and then you would exit, and then either roll back around if you wanted to use the vacuum station, or you would you'd leave by Norwell Drive or turn left and exit back onto the highway from the access available beside Dairy Queen. So generally, our form and character for this building, we had a really interesting conversation with our clients, and they wanted the brand of the car wash to be the architecture itself. So that set up a really interesting tone for us to be able to kind of develop some ideas. And what came out of that was essentially a kind of a pavilion type of architecture that expresses the sort of the car culture, the sort of the motion of vehicles on the highway, and presents itself as a little bit of a icon at the corner of the site. So what you see here is the elevation if you were at the traffic lights looking at the building. We have this red colored shroud material which comes up the wall and then runs over and becomes the canopy that's expressed on all four sides. So at every point of opportunity to see the building, you can witness this canopy flap that sort of enfolds and wraps over the building. On the second floor, we have a little manager's residential suite, and then attached to that is this shoulder piece, which is the opportunity for us to place some signage, present the car wash. Again, the idea is it's a collection of little pieces that come together to create this really interesting form and character. We feel that's playful, but also indicative of the brand that the owners want to go for. So just real quickly, the floor plan, we have all of the systems, and I'll note that a lot of the water use and reclaim is all dealt with. The recycling of the water that's used is sort of all dealt with. We have other stormwater issues and that we'll get into, but this is the little manager's office. There's a washroom and then an entryway and a staircase up to the second floor, which is the residential suite. So the manager can be on site. It's an opportunity to have a resident on the property, which, you know, just sort of alludes to the safety and security of the site and the building being occupied all the time. Off of the one side of the building is a little rooftop patio, so there's some outside amenity space for the residents. And then we'll take a quick look at the elevations. So this is so our materials are a combination of. So we have gray corrugated metal, dark gray ephes or a stucco panel with a relief panel in it. We have corrugated metal, and then we have the red aluminium cladding system. So overall, the building utilized some robust materials that are maintenance friendly and long lasting. And yeah, so this illustrates the upstairs glazing over the staircase into the residential suite. And then you can see the residential suite in this elevation. Just quickly going through to the other side, this is the face that would be off of Norwell Drive, and then you can see sort of the landscaping screening that wraps around the corner of the Island Highway and Norwell Drive. We'll introduce landscape in just one second, but we've created buffers so that the traffic car lights don't interrupt with highway traffic and other traffic along Norwell Drive. Here a little bit. So this gives you a sense of the material palette that we're using, the different types of the aluminium. We've got accented wood soffits, we've got some guardrails, and you know, the storefront type glazing. So that's that real quickly. Yeah, no, we're pressed for time, but that sort of rolls through the form and character of our building. And I would at this point just introduce Jack Tupper, who is our landscape architect, and he can speak to some of the landscape features, and then we'll, following that, we'll introduce Scott, who's our civil consultant on the project. So, Jack, I will move through the slides if one of you let me know.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the landscape has been designed to be quite simple, but relatively bold considering its setting. The design itself resonates with the car wash is mostly of an water element. It will be unique to the wider industrial and retail setting, considering that the larger landscape is mostly a parking lot with asphalt and concrete and those sort of materials. So this vegetated intersections should be quite visually striking when you enter the neighborhood. If we go on to the next slide, as we noticed, the site itself, it doesn't really have much vegetation at the moment. There's one avenue tree on the corner that's been heavily cut back and pruned. We don't necessarily know who did that, but we think it could be because it is quite close to an adjacent utility pole and just behind the back of curb, so it visually blocks quite a lot. We're proposing that we'll replace this one tree with around 14 other trees, 2 of which will be avenues as well, so it keeps on that species of all native species as well. On the next slide as well, the landscape itself is relatively simple. It's mostly planting beds with soil. The only structural area is around the retention pond that I'll come on to. It's a simple landscape. At the end of the site, you pass the parking areas. On one side, it's mostly vegetated around the edge to stop that lead of light going to the adjacent properties. There's a concrete footpath with a saw cut joint that leads towards the residential entrance and the manager's office. And in the center of the turning radius is a retention pond where we deal with most of our stormwater needs. that are required. If we go to the next slide as well, the planting itself has been designed to be mostly hardy, predominantly native species. A significant amount will either be evergreen or it will provide some winter interest as well. The species themselves will bloom at various points through the year, provide a lot of forage for beneficial species of birds, pollinators, other things of that nature. We hope that the landscape and the design of it will be quite visually impressive for people that either use the facilities or pass by. And then if we go on to the next section, as I mentioned, the only real structural element is the retention pond in the middle. It's got very general slopes on each side, about 3:1. There's one small retaining wall by the manager's office or the staff office, but it won't be more than 600 millimeters, so there's no major fall height anywhere on the site. The stormwater retention pond will be vegetated as well, and Sybil can give you a little bit more information about that at a later point. So we're hoping that the whole site will just be a very soft and inviting space. And it's relatively straightforward. Around the boundary, as I mentioned, there will be a hedge treatment, and where we need it, it will raise to around 4 feet, so that we can stop any light from passing through the adjacent roadway. And this will be an evergreen hedge as well, so it will be throughout the year. And I believe that's most of the landscape elements that we're proposing. You can pass on to Sybil.
Sure. Okay, Scott, feel free to take us through the civil aspects of our design.
Okay, thanks for coming, Jack. And here we have another exciting project in city of Nanaimo here, and we'll just flip through our civil drawings, which most of the panel have seen. They're very difficult. We've extracted a couple of the other pages to speed this process up a bit. So here's our site plan. Gives a little bit more context to sort of what the existing utilities are around the site. You notice that little, we've highlighted the red cloud there. That's actually the area of the site that's already been remediated from the existing gas station. So it's just for clarity for everyone, if anyone's wondering what that is. Okay, let's go to the next slide there, please. Okay, here's our site servicing. The storm services is going to connect to the existing storm that runs along the boundary of the existing mall and the access road to where the Dairy Queen is. Water is going to come off of the road, parking the Norwell, and we have a sanitary sewer connection. And as Glenn had mentioned, the car wash has a reclamation system where it's reusing the water and it goes into a series of chambers, and there's a process that assists in cleaning the water and recycling it, and then it flows back out through the sanitary system. Go to the next slide. Sorry, back one. So for our stormwater detention, we have the two components. One is the retention. So the retention component is going to be a combination of soil storage volume, and then we have some permeable gravel areas that are around the site that we're utilizing, and then we also have, as Jack mentioned, the retention pond. The retention pond is right in that area, so we're actually going to take all the runoff that comes off the roof, and we're going to run it into that. And we ran our calculations, and for this site, we need it's like about 45 cubic meters of storage, and that's an accommodation. The second requirement for stormwater management is the detention system. So we're going with our traditional type control manifold and storage in pipe, usually utilizing the pre and post development flows, and the calculations that come up are, I think we need about just over 5 cubic meters. So in this case, we're going to store it inside a pipe, larger pipe than is actually required. So there's our storage pipe, and then Our control manhole is a little bit to the right there, and then we are in for this site where we had a lot of bars and cervix moving. We're using oil grid separator before it goes into the city's municipal system. We can flip to the next page there, please. And a little typical detail of what the retention pond is going to be, bottom left-hand corner. And then there's our flow control structure. It's all plotted up there for you. You can go to the next slide. That's all the supporting calculations. Next slide, we're going to move into fire protection, which is just the fire hydrant. So this is what we're showing in all of our drawings now, just to make the whole process a little bit smoother as we move through it. The next slide is, okay, so because of the nature of this site, we got tasked with making sure the vehicles could get into the site, out of the site, all different types of vehicles. So this would be like the turning radius for a fire truck. Just sort of flip through, and this would have been the turning radius for an F-350 pickup truck. So making sure that the vehicle can get in and get out of the site from all different directions. This would be just a passenger car, which we do it where the truck works. We showed it. And here we have, so this is a back truck that needs to come in, and they have to clean out the oil water separator, and they also have to clean out the water reclamation tanks. So we've provided, we actually contacted the end user, and the service provider is going to be provided to get the actual vehicle dimensions and all of that, used to support that service that's required. And the next one is one more there. That's a different size truck on that one. And we have a garbage truck. And that's the end of civil.
Thanks, Scott. So we'll obviously want to leave some time for questions and comments, and we'll continue our presentation by way of answering any questions that Paolo has. And thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, gentlemen. If you can, Glenn, if you could stop sharing your content for a moment. I'll just warn people that I'm zooming here through my cell phone, so I cannot see anybody's faces unless they're actually speaking. So if you have to jump in with any questions or concerns later, please speak up, or city staff will look for you if you raise your hand. So I would first, before we open up to questions to the panel members, does anybody have any questions to staff regarding the application?
I do have it as Kate.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just curious, Lisa, or even any of the project team, why there is no sidewalk being put in on that corner? If this wouldn't trigger that or not, or because that crosswalk goes to nothing.
Sorry, Glenn, do you want to talk, or do you want me to?
Yeah, well, I think the sidewalk we find Norwell, and then connects to the sidewalk, which will take you across the traffic lights over to Lower.
It goes on the road. Like the sidewalk ends, and then you have to walk around the road to cross the crosswalk. Correct? Isn't that correct? Like you have to walk in the shoulder of the road. It is looking on Google Earth.
Just to add to that, through the chair, so as part of, at the time of building permit, road frontage improvements would be required if, we have the ability to get road frontage improvements at that time. So just to clarify that part.
Yeah, so it actually is, we are showing it on our plan, but we don't have all the details from engineering yet, so it would be expanding that sidewalk, and we've shown an area, but we don't have the details yet from city engineering. Right?
Okay, because I think that's one of the greatest weaknesses of this corner, and even for Dairy Queen, is that they don't have a sidewalk that connects to that crosswalk, and you see a lot of people moving down Bone Road and crossing there over to the mall, but there is no safe actual sidewalk. Okay. So my question was just about, Lisa answered it for me, so that I can assume that this will happen.
So through the chair, so sometimes with the new road standards, there's a little bit more creativity for each site, and so needed for each site. The road frontage design for each development is a bit more tailored to that specific site. So it takes a little bit more work to determine what exactly will be there, and I don't know that it's been nailed down at this stage. But certainly pedestrian and bikes are the priority in the new road standards, and so, yeah, but what exactly that will look like for this site, I don't have that information yet, and I'm not sure if the applicants do.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Thanks, Kate. Anybody else have any questions for staff? Hearing none, now I will open it up to questions for the application. Why don't we start with Tony?
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? I got a new headset, so.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very thorough all front. The word that kept coming into my mind as we were going through all of this was refreshing. I think this is one of the very exciting, refreshing, bold, playful, daring, all those kind of adjectives that is rarely seen these days, and it's really encouraging to see that the client and the design team, etc., that have put this together. Highly appropriate for the site, particularly with all of the excitement and varied use and traffic and everything around it. Anything less bright than this would probably just disappear, and this actually makes a nice statement. I think it's going to be a real nice contribution to that intersection. It's a very tricky site, particularly as noted by Scott on all those turning radiuses, the various kinds of vehicles, odd-shaped site, and I think you've done an amazing job of taking full advantage of it. The material, the finishes are totally appropriate, all very hard finishes fit right into that particular context. And I thought the landscaping was very thoughtfully done. I only hope that it won't grow too high to obscure the building. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Kate.
Okay, sure. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. I appreciate it. It was very thorough. I don't have much to comment about the building, but I like that. I think the building does reflect its youth and that kind of car culture feeling, and it's interesting. I did note the staff made a comment. There was a staff comment about the site design, the pedestrian access to that residential unit, and I think a little more consideration for that would be great, so that you could see for whoever's living there moving in and out of that site to the mall or where have you. I'm also curious, after we saw all those turning radius diagrams, I'm assuming you can't pull the project, let me say more which direction, towards the mall to create a greater planting buffer along the Island Highway. I'm going to assume that's not possible.
Yeah, the The site is the placement of the building on the site has essentially been a collection of exercises in safely assuming that all types of vehicles are going to be, accessing it, or the ones that will fit into the car wash. And it was a combination of placing the building in a manner that responded to those turning radiuses, while still maintaining a buffer that we could work with Jack on to create a little bit of a landscape buffer. I understand that it does look a little tight, but Jack has creatively selected the material that will go in there and be fairly dense and evergreen, as he said. So the other aspect to it was trying to place the building on the site to do the least amount of disturbance to the contaminated soil, given the fact that it was a gas station. So it was kind of an interesting design challenge to take F350 turning radiuses and the areas where oil and petrol was kind of spilled on the ground, and then start from there. So, but yeah, we nudged it. It came down to a game of basically millimeters to find the appropriate buffer size for creating landscaping there. So, if we had had space, yes, we would have created more landscape along there. But we were pegged into visible creation based on a number of other factors.
Okay, I only asked because even half a meter could greatly benefit that little buffer. And then my other, just about the site and the design and the city staff comments, I agree a green roof on top of, for that residence would be lovely, but I can appreciate that's probably cost prohibitive for the client, but I'm just saying, I think that's a good idea. But I would like to speak to the plant palette for a moment. So I'm curious about the selection of trees that you have, and if you might be able to elaborate on your choice of the paper bark birch.
Yeah, I was looking at some species that I've used on previous projects and that what might do well in the environment, and we were hoping that we could choose trees that were large enough to live on the site but not be too dominant that the canopy would become an issue for either the use of the site or adjacent properties. So we were hoping that we could create enough of a tree population that it would feel much more natural, and the canopy would be lighter essentially than it would feel much more inviting than what is typical of that area. I'm more than happy that we can potentially substitute those species out for something that might be a little bit more appropriate. If you've got any suggestions, we were hoping that the foliage would be lighter though, that follows this.
Sure. I just was curious because I don't normally see that paper bark birch coming in that kind of condition. It usually likes a bit of a wetter site, and if you're really if you're interested in the birch, maybe I'd consider looking at. You might want to consider looking at the river birch. It's a little more tolerant of a little bit more extreme conditions like you might have here, or maybe a more columnar type deciduous tree if branching out is not what you want, right?
I've gone back and forth from both.
Yeah, I just thought because some of your plants are in that zone don't need as much water, and so I thought that there was a conflict with the choice of the birch and those plants, but maybe you had a specific reason. So, and then also, it's interesting, we've been seeing a few projects come through where the landscape architects are from Vancouver, and they're proposing arbutus, and gosh, I wish I could grow arbutus when I want, but they're very hard, as you probably know, or to grow when you desire. They grow when they want and where they want, very well. So, looking for that arbutus quality and not put it too big, maybe you do the strawberry bush arbutus gunedo. They can get quite big, and you still that evergreen sort of leaf. But just that it's a tree that's very, very finicky to get to grow, and maybe you might want to reconsider that as well. Especially, yeah. But I did like the playfulness of your design, and that you were talking about the bubbles in it, and the interesting use of plants. I don't know that geranium species, so I'll be curious to see how. Is that something you use?
Yeah, it's one that some local districts have used, and we've used on a number of projects. It's a BC native, from what I know. So
I didn't find that variety, so that's but I know there's others that are very similar.
Yeah, and it's just got a nice foliage that will complement some of the other species as well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think the plant palette is interesting, and I like how you put it together. I was concerned about the tree choice, that you may want to revisit that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Hey, before you go, at the very beginning you had a recommendation, I believe. I kind of passed it there.
About that, just I agree with the staff comment, or the same recommendation to improve the pedestrian connection for the, if they can find a way, or even if it's marked on the pavement or marked space for pedestrians.
So pedestrian link to the public sidewalk, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, thanks, Kate. Marie.
Well, thank you guys for very thorough presentations. Really quite excited to see something happen at this corner, which is rather barren and desolate looking at the moment. And so I think if a project like this goes in there, it's wonderful. I think you've also designed a very striking looking building that has the potential to be kind of a landmark as you're driving up the Island Highway and seeing that red sort of highlighting there. So that's a great thing. And I don't really have anything else to really add that people haven't already stated, other than I want to emphasize that I think the more foliage, dense foliage that you can put to sort of divide the road from the traffic going around through the facility will really help. And I'm really pleased to see a little bit of that one section on Norwell of denser growth as well, because again, that whole corner looks very bare, and it's all building sidewalks, concrete, pavement, and the more trees or something like that we can add going to soften, really sort of liven that corner a bit. So I really appreciate that. So, thanks. Look forward to seeing this project happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Is Tyler around still? Is he here?
I'm here.
Okay, Tyler, you're up.
Thanks everyone for the presentation. Like Tony said, I found it sort of thorough but to the point, which is really nice. I'll be perfectly honest. When I looked at my agenda package, car culture is really not my thing. So I read through the staff report and could feel my biases coming in. Was pleasantly surprised when I got to the actual package and saw the design. I think it's a very attractive building, and especially considering with how that site has been for some time. So I would just echo sort of the comments around the more landscaping, the better. I think just because it is such a sea of asphalt in the area, I don't think it falls just to your project to solve that. But you've seen the area, we've Googled Earth, and it's just so much concrete and asphalt. So if there is any ways to add it in, I think you've done a really great job, Jack, already. I've learned a thing or two from sitting on this panel, and I do have heard that arbutus trees are extremely difficult to transplant anywhere. So Kate's already covered that. So other than that, I would just echo that the more greenery and the more we can break up that asphalt, the better. And overall, I think you do wondrous improvement to the corner, and it is quite an attractive building design landscaping scheme. So thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. I believe I've got everybody at least once. Is that correct? I'm not missing anybody?
Mr. Gurr.
Is Gurr here? Seeing not.
Yeah.
Is Gurr, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so great project. Thanks for the presentation. The other thing I thought is the garbage on the Norwell side, and can it be moved to the Jerry side? Or is truck traffic and truck movement not going to allow that?
I think we're going to, we still need to review and get into more detail on that, but I mean, obviously if garbage is going to be placed somewhere on the site, we need to address its screening and all of that stuff. So right now the car wash, the model of the car wash actually produces very little waste, but we do have a residential component, and so we're going to be, through the process, we'll be looking at either a private garbage pickup, or if it's possible to have it, the residential portion attached to a city pickup schedule. So that would depend on that. Ironing out those details will depend on the size of the garbage room. I mean, I think a typical garbage enclosure for such a small building and such a small demand would be excessive. So we're hoping that we can keep it at a fairly domestic level based on the actual use, and yeah, so that's kind of where we're still kind of pressing out those final details there.
Okay. And then, yeah, I know the lower roof and the upper deck there, this is usually what council would say, if there's any rooftop equipment, that is extremely similar material as well. I don't know if that's needed in that apartment, but if you do, that is extremely just in the flavor of the building.
Yeah.
Okay, there's rooftop equipment plan?
Alfred, are we locating most of our mechanical equipment inside the mechanical room itself?
Yeah, well, I've heard from the mechanical engineer that we don't need much, and we hope we can deal with it under the roof as much as possible, and not affect the clearness of this of these lines of this design. You know, anything that we add to it would look bad, so we try to avoid that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Garrett. I'll just jump in and echo most of the comments regarding the form and character of the building. Obviously, it's going to add a much-needed spark to that corner. It's been vacant for such a long time. My office is only about 400 yards from there, so I drive by there every day for the last 30 years or so. So I think what you've done with the form and character and how you sited the building, not running it parallel to Norwell Drive, so you're able to get nice landscaped areas along the Norwell side and on the corner, which I think is probably going to help it greatly. The project as a whole, I really have no major concerns about it. There were some staff comments that I would point out. The weather protection of the door over the residential unit, I don't believe there's really any coverage there. Is that correct, Glenn?
There is, so the canopy does extend past the door. I think we may be shifting the door around onto the door's at the bottom of the staircase now, so there is, the canopy is sort of extends beyond that, or the floor.
Is it a second floor canopy, or do you have a canopy down the lower level, right over the door?
No, it's the canopy, it's the red canopy, which is at the first floor level.
First floor level. So, yeah. How much coverage do you think you have there?
I think there's probably about 3 feet or so, because the canopy kind of butts into the mast, which is the stairwell up to the second floor. So basically, if you walk out of the door at the bottom of the stairs, we have canopy extending away from you across the sort of the length of the building until it starts to jog backwards. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And also, have you given any? Obviously, I would echo Kate's comment about considering a green roof, not necessarily recommending it. But did you look at that at all?
It was sort of tossed in there when we first looked at the site, and I sort of realized it may be a challenge with the stormwater management system, but I think we very quickly realized that through the landscape design and Scott's work on civil retention and detention, that it would have been it wouldn't actually have been needed, whereas on other projects that we've done recently in the Nanaimo, we've had to install detention and green roofs as part of that, so that we could physically meet the demand for the pre and post. So I think for this one, what we really enjoyed as part of the design process was the sort of the Formula One pavilion racy window red folded flap thing, and I think putting a bit of fuzz on the rooftop of it just might detract from its sort of shifty nature. So I think that's probably the rationale.
Yeah. So then I would probably recommend that you consider at least enlarging the patio areas. Like put some potted plants out there and still have room to have chairs and stuff. So I don't think that would affect too much regarding the load on the roof and the railing detail you have, whether or not that needs to be changed to give it a little bit more privacy. I'm not sure if you thought about that one as well.
I think our rooftop patio is 12 feet by 12 feet. So, based on it being a sort of a one-bedroom apartment, so that's a fairly generous deck space if it was any other kind of condo. So we're hoping that would be an adequate space for someone to be able to comfortably place some outdoor furniture and still have some space to sit there. Again, with the cool thing I find with pitch fencing is that you never get the build-up of condensation and that kind of stuff. So when you're sitting there, you do have an opportunity to see through it, but it does provide a fairly comfortable level of screening. I don't necessarily want to hide somebody away behind the thing. I understand that we're in a very exposed corner, but it also kind of feeds into, after hours when the thing is closed and the mall is closed and everybody around you is not home, it would be nice to sort of see that there was somebody out there and there were eyes on the street, and that maybe that's going to contribute to part of the bigger plan of providing safe and comfortable streets. So I'm a bit reluctant to maybe hide people away up there. I understand that, and I know that there was mention of putting deck space on the other side as well, but again, it's kind of. We wanted to pick the side that was, turned its back on the car movement of the highway and sort of pointed people back to the residential neighborhood. So that's kind of our rationale for where we are today. I mean, we could, if it's something that we need to look at further based on a recommendation, then we could address it. But I think we
the railing probably doesn't bother me as much as I think that the larger patio would be nice, that it would just expand the area. Even having built-in planters up there to encourage planting would be just a little bit nicer to have up there. And I think if you saw some plants that even came above the railing, it add a little bit more character to it too, not just a better place to be able to sit outside. So. The only other comment I have is I noticed in the planting palette that there were no evergreen trees at all. Is that correct?
Sorry. Yeah, at the moment we haven't got any yet. However, given the comments that Kate provided, I think we're trying to substitute in the machine. I
think that would be a wise choice. Obviously, deciduous trees look great in the spring and summer, but through the winter months they don't look a lot like much. And there's a lot of smaller evergreen trees, spruce and such, that would probably work very well. And you know, just even one on the corner, maybe one near the detention area, or a couple there even. I think that would work quite well to give it a good mix of talent there.
Well, now that the trees might get substituted out, I can throw in an evergreen tree as well. Switch it up that way.
Perfect. That's all I have. Does anybody else have any questions?
Did Marie speak?
Yeah. No other comments or questions? Okay, so there are no variances, and I have what appears to be 5 recommendations and or considerations. Kate had a comment to consider alternatives to the birch trees and the arbutus trees in the landscape concept. Also to recommend adding a pedestrian link to the public sidewalk. Also look to make sure that any rooftop equipment is screened. Recommend a larger patio on the 2nd floor, and look to add evergreen trees to the landscape concept. Am I missing anything, or does anything need to be reworded there?
I just wouldn't bother putting into one of the larger patio. I mean, that size of patio for a 1-bedroom unit is huge. And, you know, the person's going to rent it out for dance parties or something. You know, 1 or 2 people up there.
Okay. Does everyone else agree with that?
Well, I'm thinking it's a kind of a functional, very functional apartment that's related to the business. I'm assuming like a caretaker, somebody living there, so not that they should have less space, but I don't think it's their priority in this situation. The building is there for another purpose. That's a add-on. I'm okay leaving and letting them decide.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Sorry, Kevin, it's Kate. I just had a comment. I was thinking, is the patio fully exposed on 3 sides?
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like it might be a weird space to sit, given where it is and how the traffic flows there. That the only benefit of it being bigger is you might be able to, like, I feel like it might need one screening on one side to make, I don't know. But I'm very sensitive about those things. So
yeah, one of my concerns was that it's on the north side of the building. So to be able to get a lot of natural sunlight, whether you have plants or whatever on that patio, you might not get it at 12 feet away from the building. So whether or not that holds any weight, and that it's whatever you guys think. If you guys think it shouldn't be there, I'll remove it. Okay, so nobody wants to jump in favor, so I'll remove that one. Lori? Anything else on the recommendations? So I have 4 of them now. Seeing none, then I would like someone to make a motion to accept the application as presented with those 4 recommendations.
Who made that motion?
Tony?
Sure.
Can I second her?
I think Gur tried to.
Gur? Okay, I'll put Gur in as a seconder.
You can't see you, Gur, unless you put yourself.
Yeah, sorry. So I have a motion made by Tony, seconded by Gur. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Can't see it, can you?
Opposed? I'll take it as staff that nobody opposed it. So the motion carries. Thank you very much, Glenn, Jack, and Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Nice to see you, Scott. Good to see you too, Gary.
Okay, to move on, I will be stepping down as interim chair, and we'll invite Charles back in to become chair again.
And this is one of my applications, so I'm going to be with the team presenting by not talking, I don't think. I think I can stay on. I was told the same stuff that Charles was told earlier, so the staff, or through the chair of the staff, what is the procedure? Can I stay, or what happens now?
I think the practice would be that you do need to leave the meeting, similar to how Charles did. Yeah, it's best practice.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Could we, just jumping in, could we get that verified through legislative services? Because sometimes the person on the panel is actually doing the presentation. That's happened many times, like when Will Malvo was on the panel before, and other landscape architects too. So can you get that verified for next meeting?
What I do know, through the chair, what I do know is that it's actually the discretion of the person who, whether or not they step away or not. It's their kind of liability and discretion to step away or not. As staff, we're able to give that recommendation of best practice, but it is the choice of that person.
Kevin, I could just add, as someone that's had some fairly extensive legal advice on this, I thought one lawyer put it particularly well. If you have to ask the question, you probably should just leave the meeting.
Okay, yeah, you're right. In the past, you have been able to sit across the way there and be a part of the meeting, but I can't trip the feed or stop. Can you stop the feed, or what do I do here?
You can leave the meeting, but Laurie reminded me that this meeting is also being live streamed, so if you'd like to watch it that way, you may, and that would be through a link on the city website.
Thank you.
Okay.
Not to belabor the point, if I may, can I?
Kevin, Tony's making a question. Yeah.
Oh, no, I just had a question that relates to the AIBC requiring an architect to present their project, or at least be present when the project is presented, if it is a project that requires an architect. And there are a number of firms that only have one registered architect in their firm, so they obviously would be presenting it. And if somebody in that situation happens to be a member of a panel, there's immediate conflicts right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anybody that's part of a project, whether it's even like Charles at the last application, if there's anything that he needs to contribute to it, just like Gur being the sort of like the applicant or developer of it, I think it's well within his right to stay on just in case he has any information that could prove insightful to the application.
What are your thoughts? Is an architect, right? So that is how everything is running today, and I think we should basically hold.
At the end of the day, the legislation is pretty clear that it falls to the individual to decide if they are indeed in a conflict.
That is also my understanding.
Should he stay or should he go?
That would be for Gur
That is up to Gur to decide.
Yeah.
I think, well, Kevin, are you still old chair?
No, actually, I'll remove myself.
Did you hand over the baton?
Yeah, I handed it off. I was we're back on, so.
I'll jump in, and they're all good points, and I think the key point for Gur is if you're online with this meeting because you're the applicant and you're making a contribution to the presentation, then I think that trumps the fact that you are a panel member. Because I've done projects where I've stayed in the room and participated in the application because I'm the architect, and et cetera, et cetera. So, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, the only value, I guess, is, Will and Victoria are familiar with the project, but some of the nuances, something to be anything with the panhandle, the access, or the neighbor, I can quite answer well, but I do you know, I don't want to be having creating issues or unforeseen issues. So I'll try to find the street in this one that I think might be the cleanest for this one, and then moving forward, as Kevin has suggested, we'll probably have a better hearing or reading or answer to how we'll move or progress forward in the future.
This is Kate. I do have a question. I thought it was okay, like for myself, for example, to leave the room as a panel member and then be brought back in as an applicant?
Yes.
What I'm wondering here is if there's enough confusion and ambiguity that, and I think this happens enough since I've been on the panel, that maybe we should just get our own legal opinion. But that would just be the easiest way to get information to all panel members.
Well, I know I'm allowed to present my project to you guys, or that's how I've done it in the past.
That's correct. And yeah, and that's why I'm saying I think if I think I'm putting words in people's mouths that I've never met, but I think the issue with panel members staying on when they declare an interest, when they're not part of the presentation, there's a potential to influence, so they say. But I don't think that's why I think if there's a reasonable, rational reason why GER would stay on and be part of the presentation, I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, I agree. Over the years, most of the time when people have removed themselves in a conflict, it's normally been because they have had a previous interest in the project. Either they worked on it before for somebody else and they felt they would be in a conflict. This situation with the developer, there's someone that's part of the team removing himself as a panel member and staying on as part of the application. I see no conflict in that whatsoever.
And I think you know, to move this along, I think I'll take the hit because I'm the chair. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the applicant? Or your company is the applicant, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to ask that you stay as the applicant, because I think it's important that the applicant be part of these proceedings, and you know, observe and listen and comment as you see fit, but obviously don't make comments that try to sway panel members. And I think we can just move forward, and then we'll have a side discussion after this meeting about what is right and wrong in the eyes of legislative service. So, but I think that way we can move forward, and GER, you can stay on and be the applicant.
Thanks. Okay, we'll be doing our presentation. And then to that, Nathan Probert from Newcastle will be logging on. He had a prior conflict or meeting, but he'll be logging on shortly. Okay, and I think, I don't know if it's Lisa or Lori, but one of them is watching the waiting room, so. Okay, so I'm gonna move this forward. We have a second application this evening for Lauren Crescent. I don't know the exact address, and Lisa is going to introduce it for us.
Yes. So this is a development permit application for 30 and 32 Lauren Place to add 4 residential units to the property. A duplex building currently exists on the property. That's hence the address 30 and 32. The property actually is just finishing up a rezoning to be zoned R6, and that will be the council agenda for Monday for final adoption. And so also this property falls within development permit area 9 for multifamily development. The general development permit area design guidelines apply, and this property also falls within the hospital area plan, and there are guidelines in this document that would also be applicable. Variances are proposed for building height and for the rear and side yard setbacks.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Quick question out to panel members. Any questions for staff? No, okay. And I realize I just jumped the gun because we haven't even had the presentation yet. Okay. Will, are you doing the presentation?
I guess I am.
Okay, can you do the share screen? Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to the presentation team, Gar. As Lisa mentioned, this is a little project for modest residential units in the hospital area. I actually find this to be quite a treasure of a site, actually. I didn't actually even know that it existed, but it's kind of a wonderful location, just given its proximity to everything, parks and transportation and shopping and various other services, hospital as well. Just to quickly put it in context, a little off the screen here, but we have Waddington along here, and the intersection a little further down with Town Site. So it's a nice little enclave, and it backs onto Beaufort Park, which is, again, another little gem and a wonderful little spot. Just for its irregular shape and the way that it has all these lovely pathways and interconnects to the neighborhood and out to Seafield Crescent. So Lorne Place is a cul-de-sac. It is predominantly duplexes, all of older stock. I'm going to say probably 70, 80 kind of vintage. There is, in fact, on our site here, a duplex already that is probably of that vintage. Panhandle lot, fortunate for the owners that the location of the duplex that's there left a remaining backyard that was quite sizable. And in this day and age of trying to increase density, this has been a wonderful spot to do it. I think of this site as originally being created and zoned for simply a duplex. We are, by the nature of this project, actually putting 6 units on it, so a fairly remarkable increase on the density. A little more context to it. Again, I mentioned that these are all duplex units. Every one of these are duplexes. I believe this one's actually a fourplex, and this has also a panhandle lot that is just to the north of us. Gives a little bit better view of the duplex that's on there, and also a view of the park and trailway systems that go through there. A quick streetscape for you. Our site doesn't have a lot of street presence. It is just a panhandle lot, and it sneaks up here between the buildings. This is a little more distant, but same thing. Site plan. Very simple concept to this thing. Again, here's the existing duplex. This is really just taking 4 cubes, if you will, 4 building blocks, and placing them in the backyard in such a way that we create offsets and private areas for each of the units. It's also created a nice little courtyard area that is providing access to all 4 of our units. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got an entrance number 1 there, number 2, 3, and number 4. There is, I won't go back to the aerial, but there is a stand of trees along Beaufort Park. I think they straddle the property line, or there's some bit of scrub that winds up being on this side, but there is a fairly good stand of trees along there. We have some, I don't know, duplex or another single family, but significant separation with a backyard in this property. Parking, well, access, I guess, first. Again, mentioned it's a panhandle. It's a very narrow panhandle at 3 meters. There is an easement over the property in front, 2022 North Place. An easement over that allows us to widen that panhandle to a full 6 meters. Brings us back into a small parking court.
We do meet the minimum required for parking, so we're not looking for any variances there. It's a total of 9 parking stalls. Our units are a mixture, well, predominantly 2-bedroom units. There's one unit here that is a 1-bed, a 1-den, no bedroom. Got a little bit of a loft in it. We have just pedestrian connections to touch on that. I mentioned the courtyard here that's providing access to all 4 of the new units. We've also got a connection here to the park through a gate. And we have the classic painted line on asphalt that gives us pedestrian connection shared with the driveway access connecting all of that. Don't know if I've got much more to add in terms of the site. Plans for the 4 units, again, 1, 3, and 4 are the 2-bedroom units. These are all 2-story, 3.5 units. Almost perfect square, just to give a sense of the size of these units. They're 24 by 24, so they really equate to the size of a double garage. So fairly tight. This is kind of an urban living scenario that we've got here. Each of the 1, 3, and 4 are more or less identical. There's some subtle differences just to relate it to the site and the outdoor areas. It's Unit 2 that's a little bit different. Like I say, it's not a 2-bedroom unit, mostly because of the parking ratios. We get away with a slightly larger ratio with the 1-bedroom unit. But nonetheless, I think it winds up being a pretty cool little suite, and I'm sure there's a strong market for it. Upper floor, again, pretty efficient in terms of the layouts, 2 bathrooms, 2 bedrooms, a staircase, and a nominal amount of corridor. So speaking a little bit to its, well, I'll just start with the form. Again, very simple forms. These are all, they're 24 by 24 boxes, 2 stories tall. Very simple shed roof on each one of them. Each unit is oriented slightly differently and creates, as an end result, a nice mix of forms and shadow lines and give and take with all of these units. And as I mentioned up top, it's also creating some very nice private patio areas because of the offsets and the segregations from adjacent units. Speaking to its affordability, I just kind of like to think of this thing as materials are kind of right off the rack. This is vinyl sided. It is an asphalt roof that we've got on it. What we're playing with though is a little bit of mixing up of siding profiles, different colors, and introduction of wood-ish vinyl products that I think breaks up these facades. Not that they're terribly large, but it breaks them up nonetheless, and I think it's a fairly effective composition at the end of the day. Entrances to the suites, we punched them up with a little bit of glass in the door and some color. Each entrance also has a canopy over each one, gives the weather protection. With the compositions, I think are very well balanced. I don't know that I've got much more to add to that. Next slide, I think Lisa spoke to this a little bit. This is the existing duplex, and has turned out was quite accidental, but the color palette we chose for the new units does actually match up pretty closely with the duplexes there. We're just putting a little bit more emphasis on the entrance element, again, pulling over some of the finishes, the doors, the wood look siding, and it's actually an existing roof that's there, but touching that up a little bit to tie it together. And finally, just diagrammatically showing the degree of the variance, or the amount of that we're projecting over height. 7 meters is our maximum height, less than 3 and 12. I typically find that 2 stories and feet roof with a shallow roof pitch tends to exceed the 7 meters. I guess from my perspective, or maybe feeds into the rationale for it, but if this roof pitch was actually a 4 and 12, we wouldn't be asking for a variance. But I'm kind of sticking with the 312. It doesn't allow us to use the asphalt shingles, and I think the lower profile gives it a more appropriate look to the building in proportion. And I think that kind of wraps up my portion of it. Maybe I can turn this over to Victoria.
You got my drawing. Hi, everyone. Well, I think you have my drawing.
I do. I didn't know if you would have it as well, but I can certainly pull up your drawing.
Thank you. So, as Will has said, the location is amazing. When you actually look at all the trails, the little drawing on the bottom right, it sort of connects to pretty much every major trail in Nanaimo, in central Nanaimo. So it's and by a nice street or the park, and that Beaufort Park is really cool because there's a I don't know if you've been there, but there's a food forest, there's a community garden, there's a dog leash park, there's fields, there's a natural area. I mean, there's some issues in there, but homeless and so on, but there's potential to have everything in that little park. So it sort of impacts the way the design was done, in that the design provides small, intimate spaces with the idea that anyone living there has the access to all these other spaces, which is, I think it's a fairly unique site, actually. And so the way Will has planned the unit has created this lovely little courtyard for each. So each unit has their own little space. Well, 2 and 3 share a space, but I kind of designed the soft spaces so that there would be a tree directly in front of each front door, apart from 2, because it's the way it's designed. But all the other units, when you come out the front door, your focal point is a multi-stem tree, so you have that sort of illusion, sort of privacy, not feeling hemmed in, but that kind of illusion of a space. So there's an actual little place outside your front door with a bench, and if you have little kids, it would be an ideal little space that you could demarcate, say, okay, don't go beyond these boundaries. And if the kids were friends, there's chalking space, there's places to drag a table out and share with your neighbors. So I think I think it's a nice. I noticed there was a comment in the staff comments about putting more softscape, but I did it. So I think I like the balance that I have between hard and soft, because it gives you a feel of enclosure, and yet it leaves you with space. And if you wanted to put a tub of plants, etc. And the trees will be specimen trees in there, so they'll just arch over the space and make a nice roof. There's I've sort of enclosed that north side, well, not enclosed, but I formed the fourth side of the courtyard with a pergola, and the plants can drip over it. So you'll have, again, the illusion of a private pedestrian space. And then, there is the conflict with cars as they're parked there, but you can wend your way through the cars and out to the park. It's not an ideal, but it's a tight site, so something's got to give. And then there's private spaces around the edge are mostly southeast facing, and then a fairly considerable buffer. And the trees there's trees that are all a bit sort of, some of them are alders with dieback and willows along that edge. It's actually quite hard to tell exactly where the property line is because there's so many blackberries all along those property edges. But the idea is that the vegetation will mimic a kind of forest edge condition with planting, and the idea is to put as many plants in there that attract bird life as possible, because as everyone knows, we're running out of habitat for songbirds. So that's kind of what I concentrated on, is a kind of layering approach to planting and giving people privacy but letting light in. And then it has a little path into the duplex on the east side kind of joins in the courtyard, and the one on the west side has its own garden, and they use that for growing things and play and so on. So we've left that as is because it works for the people who are living there right now. And there's a little vignette of my design elements on the bottom left, and I just used some of the language in the architecture and just a kind of split rail fence to demarcate it between the park, because I felt that was a kind of appropriate fence to have against the park. And so the views in and out are nice. And my plant palette, there's about, I think, I can't remember the count of the trees, but there's over 20 trees that are going in there. So again, they're narrow conifers and fairly well-behaved trees, so they're not huge, but they'll fit the space. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. There are a couple of other things I recall as you were making a presentation, and just to avoid the question, lighting. We've got some bollard lighting within your softscapes there in the courtyard area. On the units themselves, we have lighting at each of the entranceways, and same thing with patios, outdoor spaces. So this area around here will actually be quite well lit. And one other item that pertains more to the unit layouts than anything, I didn't highlight the fact that each unit has a small room with an exterior door. This is where we are managing our totes for garbage recycling and opportunity for bicycle storage as well. I don't know whether Nathan has joined us or not.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, I can be Nathan for a minute.
Sure, go ahead, Victoria. I did get a quick email from Nathan with a very brief civil overview, but I think it pertains more to your stuff, Victoria. Oh,
I just forgot to mention in that bottom, in the southeast corner, the little top spot we were intending to put a rain garden, and there is a slight grade change there, but to accommodate in there, there's a rain garden, and there'll be bioswales as probably down as necessary, maybe from where Unit 4 comes along that southwest boundary, that'll be incorporated in there. And now you can be Nathan.
You pretty much covered off half of my coaching on the stormwater management. What Nathan relayed to me is quite simply that there is enough soft surface on the site here to deal effectively with the retention, and Victoria, as you highlighted with the rain garden and rock pit that we have in the bottom corner, that takes care of the detention aspect of it. So pre and post are managed using those tools. And Gur, unless you feel the need to add anything, I think that finishes our presentation.
Only thing I'd like to say is that these won't be seen from the street, reception buildings, and the visibility from the road and the lack of impact on the neighborhood, minimal and we.
Okay.
Thank you all. Will, can you stop sharing your screen? Thank you. Okay, I'll rewind the cassette a little bit and ask panel members if they have any questions for staff. Lots of shaking heads. Okay. So I will open it up to questions and comments to the applicants. I'm going to start and go right to the bottom of the Hollywood Squares. Tyler.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks everyone for the presentation. I think it's a really great project. The only one thing I sort of wondered on the staff comment, where is it here? Just around extending the landscape buffer along the full length of the south property line. Wondered if there was a reason for not doing that, and if there isn't, it's just possible to do so. Other than that, curious for other people's comments, but I think it's, from a landscape perspective and design perspective, it's very attractive. So thank you.
Did I answer that question? The buffer? Yeah, and I guess the reason was that we didn't do anything in that garden because people are using it, so it could easily be extended if we think that, if that was thought to be a good idea.
Victoria, do you know what the nature of the existing garden is? Is it densely planted or not? Or?
No, there's a lawn, there's some vegetable gardens, they use it to play, right? And well, I think
yeah, there's a cherry tree. The yard isn't large as it is now, but they do use it for gardening, and they actively use it, so we didn't want to disturb it, and we wanted to kind of minimize the impact on their property. Even us coming into the area at the front, the left unit, we are kind of imposing in their property. I know it's going to be a strata and there's some common properties, but we didn't want to have too much impact and disturbance on the existing tenants because they're staying in buildings being occupied. So that was the rationale to adopt the landscape there. There's already a fence and everything too. We did at one time discuss having a path going through behind the property through 20 and 22, but it was cleaner and simpler that the path remained at the front over the easement. So we didn't have the rationale or idea to continue that buffer through that rear property.
Okay, thank you. Marie?
Yeah, okay, yeah, a lovely project in terms of that one corner. I like the way you situated the building and how you staggered the different units, and that creates this really nice private space in the back. And the courtyard is just a great idea. I can see that being a really sort of active meeting place because everybody's going to be sort of coming and going in that location through that space there. So yeah, no, and I think you've done a great job with the different materials and so on, and mix and match, and get a really sort of interesting building without being too high end in terms of cost of materials and things. Just a couple of things I was wondering about the garbage. You've got separate little rooms now. I'm wondering who's going to be doing the garbage. Is it a private contractor? Is it the city? Like, does everybody have to drag their bins out to the street? What's the plan for that?
Maybe I can speak to that and then turn it over to you, Ger. I think because of our strata development, this will be private collection. So what the protocols are, I'm not entirely sure. Ger, maybe you can enlighten us as to what the protocol is right now and how you see that being expanded.
Currently, it's city collection is just duplex, but when we develop the property, we'll do fourplex that will all become one property. So therefore, it will trigger that the city will be making up for private collector. So there'll be a set schedule. Everyone will, have their bin rolled out in front of that property. The private truck will come and collect the bin on site. So there won't be anything rolling up the street or up the access. So they'll simply pull it up from their garbage areas and have it near their front door or collection area in front of the property there.
Yeah, that to me sounds really complicated, especially in that tight courtyard space. You're going to have, you know, recycling bay and whatever, all these different units dragging their stuff and having all sorts of bins out there. I'm wondering about the possibility of just having larger bins, rolling bins, and placing them at the end of the driveway there where you've got the parking spot. The reason I say that is I live in a building with 7 units, and we just have 2 big garbage bins for like the garbage, and then we have 3 like recycling bins, glass, different ones. They're just larger, and everybody shares them, and so the company just comes in and just has to empty those, not all these different ones from different households. Because it's such a small project, I'm just wondering about the efficiency of everybody having their own units and having to drag that stuff out through that courtyard all the time. So that's just a thought. I'm wondering if that could be rejigged a little bit. And yeah, I have a couple of questions for Victoria about the greenery along the park side there. I had a look at the property today, and I wasn't, like you said, it's really unclear where the property line is, and the foliage that's there looks pretty bad. Like there's dead trees, there's trees that are covered in invasive ivy, it's almost all blackberries. And I'm wondering too, in the situation, if there's a way to work with the city to sort of rip all that stuff out and just put in some fresh stuff and get rid of the ivies and that kind of thing. Otherwise, you're going to have that encroaching. I'm not sure if that would work for you, or if you were sort of thinking of that, what is there, that vegetation as being a buffer that would help hide the project? And also, I didn't wasn't clear if you're having a fence between the park and the property.
Yeah, the stick rail fence is going between the two, but we didn't want to put a board fence because the views into the park that's really nice. Yeah, I know, and that was what I was saying, just really hard at this point. So I think we have to work with the city on that, because there is that whole, the new tree bylaw stipulates where trees are, I think it's within 4 meters of the property line. So I think we need to work with the city on that. And
yeah, I just didn't see anything really worth salvageable there, and I can see a problem continuing there. It just keeps coming into the yard, into the property.
Exactly.
Well,
exactly, because we don't have anything mobile, and that's often the best way of keeping blackberries at bay on the property line. So yeah, that's a really good point, and I think when it comes to the tree management plan, the official tree management plan, that will have to be a part of it.
Right. Okay. And I'd also recommend, if you can, extending that treat area or some of that foliage right down across the next property. And I wasn't clear here if that is that you say this particular project is going to be stratified. How does the duplex fit into that? Is it part of that strata?
No, sorry, so that won't not be strata. The existing building won't be up to code. So it'll be one large parcel that we considered one property, so there won't be 4 new addresses created or 4 new titles created for the fourplex. That property will remain as 30 and 32, or I might be getting a new address, but it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it'll all be one property. So if it's bought or sold from a land title perspective, it'll be one sale.
For each unit or for the whole thing?
The whole thing. All 6 units will be considered one. You can sell the new fourplex unit separate from the duplex existing unit.
Okay, so the duplex is part of this whole thing?
Yes.
Okay. So I was looking at that and thinking, wonder if there's any more ways that you could integrate that building a little bit. It looks so different from the buildings you're putting in. I know you said the siding matched and you're doing a little trim around the door, but structurally it's a symmetrical building. It's not that exciting on the outside. Is there any way, even of say bringing a bit more of the color palette that you have on the other ones, sort of breaking up the symmetry a little bit through some sort of work on the facade to the sides to kind of make it fit in a little bit better? And again, I think this is where the landscaping, if it can extend in and around that building somewhat, will also we'll also sort of pull the whole thing together so they actually look like they maybe fit together. Because at the moment, I find that two sections, they don't really work together. And I think that's kind of an unfortunate thing because you've got a great project here, and the duplex's presence in it doesn't really help. So if there's a way to kind of put them together a bit better, that would be a great help.
Yeah, you can see in the drawings, we did bring in some plastic buffers in front of the duplex. We have added some of the treatments that we have on the new duplex onto this duplex to tie them together. The other thing is, like I said, it's sad that people you see from the street are seeing like only people that have come onto the property that as you drove down, you might not have missed this property passing that road and seeing this access down towards here. But we have tried, we're going to be changing the door, that front door treatment, that existing roof vent, and all the other stuff. I guess we could do some facade work, but we weren't planning on getting any permits or doing any structural changes to the existing unit. Also now that unit has been will continue to be occupied, so it's another challenge that might be presented to us forward as well. We're already going to have some utility services as we construct this property, but I wanted to minimize the amount of impact we have on the existing tenants. And that's another reason we didn't want to disturb their garden. It is it's not a huge garden, but it's a fruit garden. They do grow, herbs and stuff, and they do use it daily. And same with that cherry tree, it produces fruit. So just like we wanted to minimize the impact there. The other property behind doesn't have more bare, just grass, so it had an opportunity to be dressed up per se. So we're trying to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand you can't do structural change. I'm just thinking if there's any way that you can, on the siding, even add a little bit more of the thin colors or textures that you've got happening on the other buildings that might break up the sort of symmetry and, the look of it, make it fit a little bit better. Just a suggestion there, so, yeah. But anyway, big project, and it'd be nice to see the whole neighborhood end up like that. We'll work on one corner at a time, but thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Tony?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think this is a very thoughtful little project inserted into a very difficult site, particularly considering the setback that the variance has been applied for, which if adhered to, obviously would probably make the site totally unbuildable. I think the saving grace, obviously, is that the massing of the sawtooth is certainly not a straight line, and between that and hopefully the cooperation with the city on that planting edge between this project and the park, you kind of blur the lines, so wouldn't even know that there was a setback required, but I think it would be very a nice way to do that blurred edge. I think that the way the units have been designed, the floor plans, the way they're put together, massing, exterior, and all that kind of stuff is extremely sensitive to the site, and the outdoor places, not just the courtyard that we've all talked about, but those private patios at the rear are all the results of that thought that has gone into this. I think they're quite delightful spaces. That's all I wanted to say, except that just in principle, the idea of a very well done infill project on an underutilized site like this obviously is a very benign way to increase density, which we obviously need to be aware of. So congratulations to all of who put this together. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Kate?
Thank you everyone for your presentation. I don't think I have anything else to add or say, just I live in this neighborhood and I walk through that park all the time, and it will be a delight to look on these buildings. And maybe, Gary, you'll do more along around that park. I think the lots look like they could handle a few more buildings, so that'd be great. Yeah, I think with the space you had, you did a great job, and I like the courtyard feel and the little community that you're going to create there will be excellent. And because it's on that big park, I think a lot of people will find it very attractive to live here. I don't have any recommendations. I don't have any issue with the rear yard setback areas, given it is on a park and the condition of the edge of that park. I think this fits in well. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Will, Victoria, nice to see you guys again. I'll come back. Very nice little project you have here. I really don't have any issues at all, at least nothing major. I love the siting of the buildings, the form and character. I think Will, you probably overdid it on form and character, because like what Marie mentioned about the existing duplex, it kind of overshadowed it quite immensely, and I think I agree with her. If there's anything that you can do to improve the form and character of that building, even though what Gerber said about not really being able to see it from the street, I think that it's still justified. I think if you could do even some minor things to that. I know you are doing some minor things to it, but I think you can probably go a little bit further. I have no problem with the variances, especially the height variance, because you can increase the roof pitch to 412, and you'd be under the height restriction because it jumps up to 9 meters. So I have no issues with that. The questions I have, I agree with Marie that hopefully you can work with city staff to look at removing some of the invasive planting in the park in that area. I think that would work so much better, and eventually with that split rail fence, a lot of that might overrun that area fairly quickly. Victoria, the entrance pergola, does that pretty much run across all the way from Unit 6 to just before Unit 1, between the car and the courtyard?
Yeah, but it's kind of it's just posts and beams, and then
it's kind of like more like a wide arbor almost, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not really deep. It's probably only like a couple feet deep or so.
Yeah, exactly.
And there isn't much. I don't think there's much ground planting between the courtyard and the parking. It's mostly planting that's going to go up onto the pergola. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So you can pretty much walk between almost all the car stalls, correct?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you still go out that main area. There's a little bit of planting and a bench on that.
Yeah.
On the east side.
Yeah, close to Unit 1, it looks like.
Yeah.
But it's still going to be. If the only problem I have with this project is, and I'm sure you probably agree, is the pedestrian lane between those parking stalls to get to Units 1 to 4. And I don't know what to do. I think if people are moving larger pieces of furniture or anything between there, even some of the recycling bins might be fairly tight if you have a couple of trucks in there. But I'm just throwing it out there. I don't think there's anything you can really do about it, and it's just one of those challenges that you have, right?
It's a sort of toss-up between getting a really nice space, an actual place in the courtyard versus, just exposing all the cars. And I guess I chose the former.
Yeah, and it's not the courtyard or even the pergola. It's just getting between the cars to get out. To get walked through there. That's the only thing that bothers me. But I totally agree with you about the hardscape in the courtyard. I looked at that staff comment, and I totally agree with you in that I like to see those hardscape areas, and especially I hope that you're going to put at least one of the snowbell styrofoams in there, because that seems like a perfect spot for that type of tree. And are you?
We're not having on Monday. Yeah, no, that exactly. I love those. It's cool, yeah.
Yeah, it gives you that Japanese feel. That's really good. And I'm thankful I put evergreen trees in there as well. And yeah, aside from that, it's a very nice project. And it's funny, I only stumbled across this park probably a couple years ago, and it's such a hidden gem, like everyone else said. So it's very well done to both of you, and I can't wait to see this completed. So thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I don't ask her anything because he's the applicant. So I'm going to chime in. Not going to say much because as Paul said, my initial comment was very good model for how to nest some higher density into a residential neighborhood. I think it's very well done. It's compact, but it's rich with features, which I love. But it also gives us all these issues that we're bringing up because it's so dense and so rich that we get into the weeds with people having to walk between cars, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the other point I wanted to make, I really like the fact that you kept Victoria and you kept it open to the park instead of putting a big fence. There's a number of places I've been, not in Nanaimo, but here in Victoria, that people have done that as opposed to the neighbors, and it's very interesting to see the people who do open their backyards up to a park and kind of borrow that space, and it makes a huge difference. So it also contributes to why the setback variance is not really an issue, because you're part of the larger thing. And I'm chiming in on the whole garbage issue. I love the fact that you incorporated garbage rooms, because I was going to ask, and then I noticed them on the plan. But then I'm going to counter that by suggesting that maybe, and I'm not going to make it a recommendation, but you might be able to expand your mechanical room slightly, double it in size or something. I was just checking to see where your windows are. If you expanded your mechanical room area just a little bit to get a couple of bins out there, then at least your pickup issues are dealt with. It's kind of the only space on the site that you have where you can put a common little garbage enclosure. So anyway, give that some thought, because wheeling carts between parked cars is not fun, but carrying a couple of small bags out between parked cars is doable. So I think that might help with the situation. And I'm going to chime in on the coordination with the existing, because I really like the fact that you did some work on the existing duplex, recognizing that it's part of the larger development. I think you've added some new landscaping up front. You've added the new entryway features. So I would chime in with Kevin and Marie and just say you don't need to do much more, but if you just did a tiny little bit more to tie those together, then you would really have a nice complex all wrapped up and tied together. So. And that's building features and landscaping over landscaping. I think that was a good suggestion. So having said that, I'm looking at, I think it's only one recommendation, and a comment on the variances. So we do have, we have a height variance, which has been discussed and mentioned by the applicant. And we have the setback variances. I think it's side and rear, but I can't remember exactly. And the recommendation that I've got in front of me is the one I just mentioned, which is considering further integrating the existing duplex with the new construction through color material landscaping.
Sounds good, Charles.
Yeah, okay. Actually what I'll do is ask, could someone please make a motion for accepting the application as presented with that one recommendation and accepting the variance. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Did we want to include the thing on the garbage or not?
Anyone? I mean, for me, I just mentioned it. Like, I think they accounted for garbage, which is great, because sometimes we get applications like the previous one that didn't account for garbage. But given everything they've done on site, it could be a bit of a challenge dealing with the garbage. So I didn't want to make it a recommendation. It's just a kind of a suggestion that there might be a way to incorporate some common bin area that the garbage trucks could get to. So I don't think it has to be a recommendation, but that's just me.
Do we not think that's something that the residents, there's only 4 of them or 6 of them, that they'll work it out in a friendly, cooperative, neighborly fashion? Or do we really have to get in there and tell them how to do it kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, that's I'm not sure. No, we can leave it. No, that's fine. And what about the working with the city on that border? That we don't need to mention that.
I don't think we need to mention that because I think that's part and parcel of all the next steps they have to go through. And as Victoria mentioned, there's I don't know if they're new provisions, but there's lots of interesting tree protection and sustainability guideline things that have come out recently. So I think it's just part of the process going forward.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Okay, Marie. So we have a motion on the table for one recommendation and support for the variances. Any further comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And I see none opposed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay. Other business. Does anybody have any other business? Other than the fact that we need to talk to legislative services and get stuff sorted out.
Or call a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, I would echo what Tyler said, because a few years ago I was wondering, questioning whether I was in a conflict with our project, and they told me the exact same thing. It's just like only I could decide whether or not I felt I was in a conflict, and you know, I think you have to live with your decision on whether to rule that you are or aren't. So.
Yeah, and I think the issue is not just, like, I think we're all pretty okay with that and clear. The issue is that if you have a conflict or if you have a vested interest in a project because it's one of yours, what's the next step? Because I remember the first time Gary Noble told me I had to leave the room and I was shocked. It's like, what do you mean I have to leave the room? I'm just going to sit here quietly. So I think that's the clarity we need, is that anybody on the panel who has a conflict for whatever reason, do they have to disappear, or like Kate said, you know, if you did the design on a project, you have to present it. So we just need to get clarity around that.
Well, for you, Charles, on the one that you had this, when Gary asked you to remove yourself, was it your firm that was doing the project?
Yes.
Yeah, see, I don't see an issue with that whatsoever. You're part of the team, right?
Right, and as Tony mentioned, we have, like, I'm fortunate because I'm not the only architect, but someone like Joyce, for example, as far as I know, she's the only registered architect attached to her firm, so she has to do the presentation, right? And if she was on panel, she'd be stuck. Tyler?
Yeah, I just think, like, we can talk all about how we perceive it. And at the end of the day, it really boils down to this. It's up to the person to decide. And if it gets challenged, it's up to a judge to decide whether it's a conflict, not whether we agree with that or not. And I think that's just sort of the brass tacks of it. If we can sit here and talk about it all day, and how we view it and what our philosophy is and how we interpret it. But it's only if you get challenged and that decision is made by a legal professional. So, you know, I think if there's some, you know, if it was up to me to ask legislative services, I would just ask that we have a clarity of process with the design panel. If somebody views themselves to be in potential conflict, and maybe some guidelines on what that might look like, just some examples, and then that is up to each committee member to decide at any given time. And just hope that you never get challenged, but I think it probably is super rare for something like a committee level, because ultimately this decision rests with either council or Mr. Dale Lindsay, so you know, I think the likelihood of a challenge would be minimal.
I wonder, Charles, if AIBC doesn't have a comment on this subject, they didn't run into this with every municipality in the province.
Well, it's gone way too far.
I don't know, but it's it's a good point. We could find out what their position is. But, anyway, before we go any further, I just want to say we should probably adjourn the meeting.
Yes.
And then we can stop the recording.
Yes.
So, call for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Thank you all.